Good morning, everyone. Alright, so, dreaming again last night. I dreamed, ooh, I just farted. Sorry, I fart too. I think you probably do too, I'm guessing. So I've been having another conversation with another friend of mine, and a very similar pattern that keeps happening happened again last night, or yesterday, this week. And it has to do with a French philosopher whose name escapes me right now, because I can never pronounce it right, so I don't. And he basically came up with this theory that I call recursive reasoning, but he calls it deconstruction. That's one of the problems with philosophy is people always use different words for different things, which is actually what the whole deconstruction recursive reasoning is about. It's particularly useful in discussions about religion or politics, the things that people use to define the world the most, like the deeply held beliefs people have about the world and how it works or how it doesn't work, and how it works in the nature when discussing God, and how it doesn't work when discussing politics. The way I like to conduct these conversations is to force people to define terms. In all of my understandings now, and I've studied this stuff for a decent while and studied it fairly intensively, this is really the root of the problem, is people use the same word to describe different things. And when you force them to define what exactly it is they're talking about, and you have to do this the first time a word comes up that people both are using. So the camera I've got has this automatic drop protection, so it'll just turn off if you start to shake it around violently, like I was doing. So what I was talking about, you have to define terms when you want to have a real discussion. If you don't, people are going to continue to use the same word that means different things throughout the discussion, and there'll probably be a fight. If they're countries, there will probably be a war because they're going to keep using the same words that mean different things. In the discussion with my friend, the politics one, it was the idea of some liberal agenda, which he then defined, and I was like, no, I'm not that kind of person. And that really opened up the discussion, and then we were able to focus more on the meat of it and get to those points where we agree to disagree. This is actually the other thing that I call fractal reasoning, is because you can go on and on into these discussions, but the simple point of the matter is sometimes there's a line and there's two sides to it, and people just aren't going to agree. They don't have to. I mean, there's no reason, and I keep looking over there to look at the thing. I don't know why. I should just look at the camera. There's no reason people have to agree, because people have different opinions. And actually, the variety and the space between them and this line between the two colors actually can turn into a beautiful thing. I don't know if you've ever looked at fractals, but you can look at them forever, and they're pretty cool, and they keep going. They just don't stop, because sometimes where the two basically equations meet, there's no real resolution. Where the two people meet, there's no real resolution. They can go back and forth forever, but they're just on different sides of the line. This is a big part, and for those of you who've read my book or planning on to, this is a big part. I don't actually talk about either of these two things directly in the book, either recursive reasoning or fractal arguments, but that's kind of what I'm talking about a lot. And to get to the point of this, I mean, if we really want to have this whole, one of the things I'm trying to bring about, by the way, is world peace. I know I can't do it. I can't bring peace to the world, but I can try, right? David Hume actually is another philosopher, and he was like, if everybody just listened to me, we'd probably be all right. And he's right in a sense, because if everybody started to use the same words to define things, then a lot of the arguments would fade away, or people would realize that by doing so, they could actually just be nice to one another, and it's a lot easier when you're using the same words to define the same things. Now, one of the things that my book talks about, kind of obliquely, actually, it was supposed to be the meat of the book, but then I started talking about myself and whatever, and So I'll have to write another book about this other stuff, which I can do. I've got most of it written already. And I've got a little bit of a cold now. I think I picked up something. But that's what the book is about, is using this method to define words. It's kind of an artistic, iconic method based on the electromagnetic spectrum, to be honest, but on time-space. I know that sounds strange. I've got a language built on the time cube. Who knows? But I've been working on it for 10, 12 years now, and I wrote this book about it, and people didn't get it. The first two people who I had read it really didn't get it, and really thought they did, because they really thought they knew me, and I was like, no, I don't think we've ever actually discussed philosophy or politics or God in any in-depth situation, and I love to talk about those things. I love to talk about them so much, I had to come up with a language and a way to do it so people didn't lynch me every time we disagreed. So I learned how to talk to people in such a way that I can discuss these really important things, and what I call it is recursive reasoning, and it leads to fractal arguments. Because eventually you're gonna not agree, but you can really define that point of disagreement down to a single point, which is actually a line between two fields. Usually it's all curvy and stuff. That's why I call them tensors, which is a mathematical term, because I don't think there's anything in the real world and in time-space that's a straight line or a flat infinite plane. There is no flat infinite plane. Everything curves back on itself. Study some string theory if you don't believe me. Which I think the strings are supposed to be tensors too, but they're kind of manifolds, which is... It gets complicated, by the way. Most people, and this is part of the problem, I think, is math. Like, most people... Like algebra, people were like, when am I going to need this? Algebra was invented by the Arabs like a couple thousand years ago or something. And most people never get beyond like 16th century math, maybe 17th. A little bit of Newton. When you get to frickin' Einstein, Einstein's theory is all based in tensors, right? And those people were like, what's a tensor? And it's like, well, it's kind of like a line, but not. It's kind of, what kind of tensor? And it's really like graduate level math before you even start to talk about real level math. And you got to get a PhD before you even get into the 20th century. So me saying in my book, as I do, that I solve math when I don't even have a graduate degree in it is kind of funny. People actually think I'm flat out delusional. But I think I noticed a problem that Newton had in conceiving of math that had to do with God. And, so as I kind of recursed, shall we say, his life and his reasoning, I realized that we would have had a very simple but obvious disagreement. We would have had to I would have had to disagree with Isaac Newton on the nature of God. And I could probably do that pretty easily if he were to have his knowledge of his day and I had our knowledge of our day, because they didn't have fMRI back in the day, and they didn't have really a pretty good understanding of how the brain works and what consciousness is, and now we do. I know some of you might not believe this, but there's some books out there that are pretty technical that kind of say, okay, this is probably what you are. And by what you are, meaning what you think you are. Of course, Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and now we're like, well, you actually, that is what you are, is what you think of yourself. And we can actually see that in the brain now, using some really cool tools. So part of my book also is to try and catch you folks up to what the hell people know now, which is rather amazing. And it's so dark in here because I farted earlier, and usually farting is a sign that you need to take a shit. I'm not taking a shit right now. I'm recording a video. But that's the video for today. Time cube number 2. It's a pun.